All right, get ready to dive into a world that's a little darker than usual.
Oh, yeah,
We're talking money laundering.
that's right.
And we're using Geoff White's book, Rinsed, as our guide.
It's a wild ride.
It really is, packed with real-life stories that are more thrilling than any fictional crime drama.
More twists and turns than you can shake a stick at.
So if you think money laundering is just about hiding cash in some offshore account,
Fake
you're
again.
going deep.
Uncovering the tricks
The players.
and the global impact of this often invisible crime.
So let's start with a question.
Sure.
What's the biggest problem facing a criminal who's just made a huge score?
Well, it's not as simple as enjoying the loot, is it? I mean, imagine inheriting a fortune from a long-lost relative,
Okay.
only to realize it's all dirty money. That's essentially Pablo's problem, as White puts it.
Pablo Escobar, the drug lord.
The one and only.
Wow.
This guy, he amassed billions. And his brother, Roberto, who handled the books for the cartel, had the unfortunate task of trying to make that money vanish.
Easier said than done, I'd imagine.
You think? They were flying planes stuffed with cocaine one way,
Okay.
and they couldn't even fit all the cash on the flight back.
That's an insane amount of money.
That's the scale we're talking about.
So how do you even begin to clean that much dirty money?
It's a three-step process.
Okay.
It all starts with something called placement.
Placement.
It's about subtly introducing that dirty cash into the legal financial system.
I see, so like sneaking a little bit of something into, I don't know, a recipe?
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to dump a whole bag of sugar in at once.
Right, you'll ruin it.
You got to blend it in slowly.
So instead of one massive deposit, you break it down into smaller, less obvious transactions.
Exactly. But it's more than just breaking it down.
Okay.
You need to create a convincing disguise for where that money's really coming from.
Like creating a cover story.
Precisely. One clever tactic, White explains, is the use of shell companies.
Shell companies.
Yeah, these are basically businesses that exist only on paper.
Ah,
They're like a smokescreen.
to hide the real source of the money.
Exactly. Take Ken Rejock, for example.
Who was he?
He was actually a lawyer turned money launderer.
Oh, wow.
He used to be on the right side of the law.
So he knew exactly what he was doing?
Oh, he was a pro.
And what did he do?
He chose this tiny island, Anguilla.
I've heard of it.
It's known for having, shall we say, relaxed financial rules.
A perfect hiding spot.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He set up his shell companies there.
So by channeling the drug money through a bank in Anguilla and then filtering it through these shell companies,
It's like creating a maze.
making it almost impossible to trace the money back to its original source.
Exactly. He was a master of disguise in the financial world.
Cunning, but obviously very illegal.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's placement, right?
Step one,
What's next?
layering. We'll get into that next time.
Okay, so we left off talking about layering, the next stage in the money laundering process.
All right, so we've got the dirty money stashed away. Now we got to make it disappear.
Make it vanish into thin air.
Exactly. And White gives us a perfect example of this with the Din sisters in Manchester, England.
From drug lords in Medellin to, what, some ladies running a beauty salon?
You'd be surprised. They ran a place called White Lilies. Sounds harmless enough, right?
Totally innocent.
But under the surface,
Yeah.
they were running a massive drug operation.
No way.
And their case is fascinating because it shows how these criminals blend the old with the new.
So they were using traditional money laundering tactics alongside newer, more tech-savvy methods?
Exactly. They were using classic smurfing.
Smurfing, what is that? Some kind of money laundering code name?
Essentially, they break down large sums of cash into smaller amounts
Okay.
and have a network of people deposit them in different accounts.
Clever, but sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It is, but it's effective in dodging those red flags.
So how does Bitcoin fit into all of this?
Wow, that's the interesting part. They were using both physical cash and Bitcoin.
Really? I would thought they'd go all in on the cryptocurrency.
You'd think so. But White actually talks about this guy, Arjun Badesha.
Who was he?
He got caught moving a ton of cash.
Right.
For them, proof that old school cash is still king,
Cash is king, huh?
at least for some things. But the Dins weren't just small time either.
What do you mean?
They weren't just dealing locally, they had global connections.
A global network from a beauty salon in Manchester.
It's more common than you think. They were using encrypted phones and crypto brokers.
So they were plugged into this whole hidden world.
Exactly. It just goes to show technology can be a powerful tool.
For good and bad, right?
Exactly. And often, the most ordinary looking businesses can be fronts for something far more complex and, let's face it, criminal.
It's a scary thought, really.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
about what's really going on behind closed doors.
Absolutely. So we've talked about traditional money laundering, cryptocurrency entering the scene.
Right, and the DINs were just the tip of the iceberg.
Where do we go from here?
Let's delve even deeper into the underbelly of the internet, the dark web.
Yeah, that's a whole other beast.
It is, and White doesn't shy away from it. He takes us into the world of Backpage.
Backpage, I remember that name. Wasn't that a website?
It was a classified advertising site, but it became notorious as a hub for sex trafficking.
That's awful. But how are they allowed to operate for so long?
Well, they hid behind a legal loophole, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act.
What's that?
It was designed to protect free speech online,
Okay.
but it ended up shielding sites like Backpage from being held responsible for what users posted.
So even though they were facilitating illegal activities,
They were technically in the clear, legally speaking.
that's outrageous. So how did the authorities finally catch up with them?
Followed money.
Makes sense. Everyone leaves a trail eventually.
Exactly. And Backpage's downfall was their own elaborate money laundering scheme.
What were they doing?
Oh, you name it, they did it. Shell companies, international transfers, the word.
Sounds like they went to great lengths to cover their tracks.
They did, but it all unraveled in the end. The site was shut down, and the founders faced some serious charges.
Good. But it's a reminder that behind all the financial maneuvering, there are real victims.
Absolutely. And White doesn't let us forget that. He tells the story of Melanie Thompson.
Who is she?
She was a victim of sex trafficking.
That's terrible.
It is. And her story is a reminder that these crimes have a real human cost.
It's easy to get caught up in the technical details.
Right, but we can't forget about the people whose lives are destroyed by these activities.
Absolutely. So we've gone from beauty salons to the dark web.
And we're about to go even deeper.
How deep can it go?
White takes us into the depths of the dark web, where sites like Hurt to the Core operate.
Hurt to the core. That sounds ominous.
It is. This site was a platform for distributing child sexual abuse material.
Oh my God.
It's horrifying, but it's a stark reminder of the dark side of the internet.
So how do you even begin to investigate something like that?
Well, sometimes it takes a break in a different case. Like the arrest of Eric Marks.
Who was he?
He ran a web hosting service.
Okay.
And guess what? Hurt the Core was one of his clients.
So by arresting him,
They got access to a gold mine of information, including the activities of a user called Garden.
in the garden? Sounds creepy.
That's putting it mildly. Garden was actually this guy, Matthew Falder.
And who was he?
He was a monster who blackmailed and abused victims all over the world, all from behind his computer screen.
It's incredible how someone can inflict so much pain from a distance.
The internet has given these predators a whole new level of anonymity.
And power.
Exactly. But Falder's story is a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the internet,
Justice can still be served.
sometimes it takes time and a bit of luck, but the authorities are getting better at tracking these criminals down.
It's a scary thought how technology can be used for such terrible things.
It is, but like we were saying, even in those dark corners, there's usually a money trail.
Right, and Welcome to Video, that site White talks about, is a good example.
Oh, absolutely. That case is fascinating because it shows how cryptocurrency can be both a help and a hindrance for investigators.
How so?
Well, it's often touted as being anonymous,
Yeah, that's the appeal for a lot of people.
but it can also leave a trail, a digital one, that investigators can follow.
Like a digital fingerprint.
Exactly. And in this case, it was actually a simple mistake that brought the whole thing down.
What happened?
The site's creator, he accidentally exposed the server's IP address.
You gotta be.
Rookie mistake, but it happens.
So even seasoned criminals can slip up.
Even in the digital world.
And that brings us to a new breed of criminal White talks about.
Dedicated crypto launderers.
Right, like Helix.
Helix.
It was a service advertised on Grams, which was this dark web search engine, basically a one-stop shop for cleaning your dirty Bitcoin.
Okay, so how does that work? Laundering Bitcoin, I mean,
Imagine a digital washing machine.
a washing machine.
Yeah, you throw your dirty Bitcoin in.
It gets mixed with other people's Bitcoin,
I see.
and then it comes out clean, or at least appearing clean.
So it's like money laundering, but for cryptocurrency.
Exactly. Pretty ingenious, if you can call something illegal ingenious.
But White doesn't just focus on the tech, does he? He also brings it back to the human element.
Absolutely, and the story of Kanoli Ugbodo is a perfect example.
Who was he?
He was a young guy from Ireland who got caught up in all of this as a money mule.
Money mule.
Yeah, essentially someone who moves money for criminals.
And how do people get involved in something like that?
Well, often they're targeted because they're vulnerable.
Like young people.
Especially young people. They're promised easy money, quick cash.
Which is tempting.
Very tempting, especially if you're struggling financially.
So they don't realize the risks.
Or the consequences.
Right, until it's too late.
Sadly, that's often the case.
And it's not just young people, is it? White also talks about Ramon Abbas, or Hush Puppy, as he was known on Instagram.
Oh, Hush Puppy, he was living the high life. But behind that facade, he was a major player in a global cybercrime ring.
So he was using social media to create this image of himself.
Exactly. He was portraying himself as a successful entrepreneur, but it was all a front.
Wow, so it really is true what they say. Things aren't always what they seem.
No, they're not.
So we've talked about the dark web, cryptocurrency, social media.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is.
And White doesn't shy away from the big questions either.
Like what?
Like the whole issue of privacy in the age of cryptocurrency.
Which is a huge debate right now.
It is. And he uses Tornado Cash as an example.
What was that?
It's a decentralized cryptocurrency mixer designed for privacy.
So people could make anonymous transactions.
Exactly. But then it turned out that stolen funds were being laundered through it.
So it's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
Precisely. And that's the dilemma, isn't it? How do you regulate something like that without stifling innovation or invading people's privacy?
It's a tough one. No easy answers.
No easy answers at all.
Well, that was a wild ride.
It was, wasn't it?
Geoff White's Rinsed really opens your eyes to this whole world.
It does. And it makes you realize it's closer than you think.
It's happening all around us.
All the time.
So what's the takeaway here? What can our listeners do?
I think the most important thing is to be aware, to educate yourself.
Knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. The more you know about how these schemes work,
the better equipped you are to protect yourself.
Exactly. And if something sounds too good to be true,
it probably is.
Exactly. Trust your gut, do your research, and remember that even in the digital age, there are real people behind these crimes.
And real victims.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap things up here.
Until next time.
Stay informed, stay vigilant, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.